Captain Marcus Chen had seen many strange things during his 15 years hauling cargo across the Outer Rim territories. Pirates, alien diseases, gravity wells that could crush a ship like tinfoil, and trading posts where the air itself could kill you. But nothing had prepared him for what he found floating in the debris field of the Kepler Station massacre. The wreckage stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Twisted metal, frozen atmosphere, and the scattered remains of what had once been humanity's most advanced research facility. Marcus guided his freight hauler, the Iron Dream, through the debris with practiced precision, his sensors scanning for anything salvageable. The insurance company had hired him to recover what he could from the disaster, though everyone knew the real valuable stuff had already been picked clean by the first wave of scavengers. That's when his proximity alarm started screaming. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered, checking his displays. Something was moving in the wreckage. Something with a power signature he'd never seen before. It wasn't human technology, that much was certain. The readings were off the charts, showing energy patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. He should have turned around, should have marked the coordinates and reported back to the company. That would have been the smart thing to do. But Marcus had always been curious to a fault, and 15 years of hauling freight had made him hungry for something, anything, that might break the monotony of his existence. The object was roughly humanoid in shape, about 2 meters tall, encased in what appeared to be some kind of crystalline shell. It was beautiful in an alien way, with surfaces that reflected the distant stars in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. As Marcus maneuvered the Iron Dream closer, he could see that whatever was inside the shell was still alive, somehow surviving in the vacuum of space. Probably some kind of stasis pod, he said to himself. Though he'd never seen anything like it in any of the xenobiology texts he'd studied. The energy readings were getting stronger now, and he could feel a strange tingling in his fingers where they gripped the ship's controls, making a decision that would change everything. Marcus activated the cargo bay's recovery systems. Mechanical arms extended from the ship's hull, carefully grasping the crystalline pod and drawing it into the pressurized hold. As soon as the bay doors sealed, the entity inside began to stir. Marcus watched through the cargo bay's cameras as cracks appeared in the crystal shell. Light poured out of the fissures, not the harsh white of human technology, but something softer, more organic. The shell fell away in pieces, revealing the being inside. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin had a faint luminescence to it, shifting between pale silver and deep blue depending on the angle of the light. Her hair was long and white, floating around her as if she were still underwater. But it was her eyes that caught Marcus's attention. They were ancient, filled with a wisdom and sadness that seemed older than the stars themselves. The being looked directly at the camera, and Marcus felt a jolt of electricity run through his nervous system. For a moment he could swear she was looking right at him, not just at the camera but actually seeing him through the electronic connection. Then she collapsed to the cargo bay floor, unconscious. Marcus ran through the ship's corridors to the cargo bay, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. When he reached her, she was breathing, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Her skin was warm to the touch, and when he checked for a pulse, he found something that felt like energy, flowing through her veins instead of blood. "What are you?" he whispered, but she didn't respond. She was alive, that much was clear. But she seemed to be in some kind of deep sleep or trance. Marcus carefully lifted her and carried her to the ship's medical bay, setting her down on the examination table. The medical scanner went crazy when he tried to analyze her, displaying readings that made no sense according to human biology. Her cellular structure was unlike anything in the ship's database, and the energy flowing through her body defied every law of physics Marcus thought he knew. Yet somehow she seemed stable, even healthy by whatever standards applied to her species. Marcus made another decision that would prove fateful. Instead of contacting the authorities or the company that had hired him, he set course for the nearest inhabited system and began preparing the ship's guest quarters. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she was now his responsibility. The universe was vast and often cruel, and Marcus had seen too many beings suffer because someone else decided their fate without their consent. As the Iron Dream jumped to hyperspace, leaving the wreckage of Kepler Station behind, Marcus sat beside the sleeping alien woman and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. He'd always been a simple freight hauler, moving goods from one world to another, staying out of trouble and keeping his head down. Now he had potentially the most significant xenobiological discovery in human history, sleeping in his medical bay, and he had no idea what to do about it. The stars stretched into lines outside the viewport as the ship raced through hyperspace, carrying them both toward an uncertain future. Marcus looked down at the peaceful expression on the alien woman's face and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, he would protect her. He didn't know why, couldn't explain the sudden sense of responsibility he felt, but something deep in his gut told him that this moment would be remembered. Long after both of them were gone, the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most important decisions are made not by governments or corporations or military commanders, but by ordinary people who choose to do what's right when no one else is watching. Marcus Chen was about to become something he'd never imagined. A protector of mysteries, a guardian of the unknown, and the man who would be known across the stars as her captain. 3 days passed before she opened her eyes. Marcus had been checking on her regularly, monitoring her vital signs as best he could with equipment designed for human physiology. The ship's AI had been running continuous scans, trying to make sense of the energy patterns flowing through her body. But every analysis came back with the same result: unknown. When she finally awakened, it was with a gasp that seemed to pull light itself into her lungs. Her eyes snapped open, and Marcus found himself staring into depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she sat up slowly, her movements graceful despite what must have been considerable disorientation. "Where am I?" she asked, and Marcus nearly fell off his chair. She had spoken in perfect Standard Galactic, the trade language used across human space. Her voice was musical, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "You're aboard my ship, the Iron Dream," Marcus said carefully. "I found you in the wreckage of Kepler Station. You were in some kind of crystal pod floating in space. I thought you were dead." She looked around the medical bay, taking in the human technology with what seemed like mild curiosity. "Kepler Station," she repeated, and there was something in her voice that suggested the name meant more to her than it did to him. "How long has it been since the facility was destroyed?" "About 6 months," Marcus replied. "What happened there?" "The official report said it was a reactor malfunction, but I've seen reactor explosions before. This was something else entirely." A shadow passed across her face, and for a moment the light in her skin dimmed noticeably. "My people came to trade knowledge with yours. We had learned of humanity's rapid expansion across the galaxy, your talent for adaptation and innovation. We thought perhaps we could learn from each other?" She stood up from the examination table, and Marcus was struck by how tall she was, nearly matching his own height. As she moved, he noticed that the air around her seemed to shimmer slightly, as if reality itself bent to accommodate her presence. "I am Lyrelai of the Valthara," she said, inclining her head in what might have been a formal greeting. "I was serving as a cultural liaison between our species. The humans at Kepler Station were enthusiastic about studying our technology." There was something in the way she said enthusiastic that made Marcus's skin crawl. He'd heard stories about some of the research being conducted at the Outer Rim facilities, rumors of experiments that pushed the boundaries of ethics and common sense. "What happened to your people?" he asked gently. Lorelai's expression grew distant, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "The researchers became eager to understand the source of our abilities. They believed that by studying our biological systems, they could replicate our connection to what you might call the quantum field. When we refused to submit to their more invasive tests, they decided to take what they wanted by force." Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. He'd served briefly in the Colonial Marines before becoming a freight hauler, and he'd seen firsthand what humans were capable of when they decided another species was standing in the way of progress. "My people defended themselves," Lyrelai continued, "but we are not a warlike species. We had hoped that diplomacy would prevail. Instead, the researchers activated some kind of containment field, trying to trap us for study. The interaction between our natural abilities and their technology created a cascade failure that destroyed the entire station. And you survived in that crystal shell? A last resort? Our bodies can enter a state of quantum suspension when faced with mortal danger. It preserved me, but..." She paused, and Marcus could see pain in her alien features. "I was the only one small enough for the process to work completely. The others were too powerful, too connected to the field. When they tried to enter suspension, the energy overflow contributed to the station's destruction." Marcus felt a surge of anger on her behalf, followed immediately by a complex mix of shame and determination. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Not all humans are like that. Most of us just want to get along, make a living, maybe see a bit of the galaxy while we're doing it." Lorelei looked at him with those ancient eyes, and Marcus felt as if she was seeing not just him but every choice he'd ever made, every moment of kindness or cruelty that had shaped his character. After a long moment she smiled, and the expression transformed her face completely. "You saved me," she said. "When you could have left me in the debris or turned me over to your authorities for study, you chose instead to help. That speaks well of your character, Marcus Chen." Marcus blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name? I never told you." "Your thoughts are quite loud," she said with what might have been amusement. "Do not worry. I only perceive what you project strongly. I am not reading your mind, merely sensing the emotions and concepts that radiate from your consciousness." That should have been terrifying, but somehow Marcus found it oddly comforting. If she could sense his thoughts and emotions, then she would know that his intentions toward her were protective, rather than exploitative. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Do you want me to take you somewhere? Back to your homeworld?" Lorelei shook her head slowly. "My homeworld is very far from here, in a region of space your people have not yet explored, and I am no longer certain I wish to return. The loss of my companions weighs heavily on me. Perhaps it would be better to find a new purpose among the stars." She looked directly at him, and Marcus felt that electric tingle again, stronger this time. "You seem to be a man without strong ties to any particular place or cause. Perhaps we could travel together for a time. I could be useful to you. High People's technology might prove valuable in your trade business." Marcus considered the offer. It was crazy, of course, traveling with an alien being whose very presence could probably start wars or cause governments to fall. On the other hand, he'd been alone for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it was like to have someone to talk to besides the ship's AI. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this as partners, not as passenger and captain. If you're staying aboard my ship, you pull your weight." Lorelei's smile grew wider and the light in her skin brightened noticeably. "I accept your terms, Captain Chen. I believe this partnership will prove beneficial for both of us." As she spoke, Marcus felt something shift in the ship around them, as if the Iron Dream itself was responding to her presence. The engines seemed to hum with new efficiency and the lights appeared brighter, more stable. Whatever Lorelei was, whatever powers her people possessed, it seemed that her very presence was improving his ship. This was either the best decision he'd ever made, or the one that would get him killed. Probably both. The first sign that traveling with Lorelei would complicate Marcus's life came just 2 weeks after leaving the Kepler debris field. They had docked at Meridian Station, a sprawling trade hub in the Centauri system, to deliver a shipment of rare earth metals to a mining consortium. It should have been a routine cargo drop, the kind Marcus had done thousands of times before, but routine went out the airlock the moment Lorelei stepped off the ship. Marcus had suggested she stay aboard the Iron Dream while he conducted business, but she had insisted on seeing the station. "I am curious about human society," she had said. "How you organize yourselves, how you interact with other species. I cannot learn these things from your ship's computer." So Marcus had reluctantly agreed, making her promise to stay close and try not to draw attention to herself. That promise lasted approximately 30 seconds after they entered the station's main concourse. The problem wasn't that Lorelei looked obviously alien. Her features were close enough to human that she could pass for an exotic colonist from one of the outer worlds. The problem was the way she moved, the way reality seemed to bend slightly around her presence, and, most importantly, the way every piece of technology in her vicinity began functioning better than it ever had before. The first person to notice was a Caraxian trader trying to repair a broken data pad near the docking ring. As Lorelei walked past, the device suddenly flickered to life, its cracked screen becoming crystal clear, and its sluggish processor running faster than the day it was manufactured. The Caraxian stared at the pad, then at Lorelei's retreating form, his reptilian features showing clear confusion. Then a security droid that had been malfunctioning for months suddenly straightened up and began performing its duties with military precision. A atmospheric recycling unit that had been running at 60% efficiency jumped to 120%. Station lights brightened, gravity generators stabilized, and communication arrays that had been suffering from interference suddenly achieved perfect clarity. "Lyrelei," Marcus said quietly as they walked toward the cargo office. "People are starting to notice." She looked around with apparent innocence, though Marcus was beginning to suspect that innocence was a carefully cultivated facade. "Notice what? I am simply observing your fascinating culture. The technology around you is going crazy. That trader back there is now following us, and I'm pretty sure those security guards are taking an interest too." Indeed, a small crowd was beginning to form behind them, made up of curious traders, station personnel, and what looked like a few representatives from various corporate interests. Marcus recognized the type: beings who made their living by spotting opportunities and exploiting them. "Perhaps we should conduct our business quickly," Lyrelei suggested, and Marcus couldn't argue with that logic. They made it to the cargo office without incident, where Marcus completed the transfer of his shipment to the mining consortium. The transaction should have taken an hour of bureaucratic paperwork, but the office computers processed everything in minutes, running at speeds that their designers had probably never imagined possible. The consortium representative, a heavyset human named Morrison, kept glancing at Lyrelei with obvious curiosity. "Your companion seems to have an interesting effect on our systems," he said to Marcus as they finalized the deal. "She's a technical specialist," Marcus replied smoothly. "Sometimes her presence helps with computer glitches." Morrison's eyes lit up with the unmistakable gleam of someone who had just identified a profitable opportunity. "Really? We've been having some persistent problems with our deep core mining equipment. The computers keep developing calculation errors that slow down production. If your friend here could take a look." "We're not really in the consulting business," Marcus said quickly. But he could already see that Lyrelei was interested. She had that look she got when presented with a new puzzle to solve. "I would be happy to examine your equipment," she said, ignoring Marcus's warning look. "Perhaps I can identify the source of your difficulties." Morrison practically glowed with excitement. "Excellent. The mining operation is just a short shuttle ride from the station. We could head over there right now, and I'm sure the company would be willing to compensate you generously for your time." Marcus felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. He'd wanted to keep a low profile, complete his business, and get back to space where the chances of unwanted attention were minimal. Instead, he found himself an hour later standing in the control room of a massive asteroid mining operation, watching Lyrelei examine a bank of computers that governed the extraction process. The mining facility was impressive, a complex network of tunnels and processing chambers carved into a nickel-iron asteroid. The operation employed several hundred workers and generated enormous profits for the consortium. It also, as Morrison had mentioned, suffered from persistent computer problems that reduced efficiency and cost the company millions of credits per year. Lyrelei moved among the computer systems like a dancer, her hands hovering over control panels without actually touching them. Wherever she went, the computers began running more smoothly, their displays becoming clearer and their processing speeds increasing dramatically. "Fascinating," she murmured as she worked. "Your people build these machines to perform specific tasks, but you do not give them the capacity to grow and adapt. They become stagnant, trapped in rigid patterns of operation." "That's kind of the point," Morrison said nervously. "We want them to be predictable and reliable." "Predictable, yes," Lyrelei agreed. "But why not also efficient? Your machines are capable of so much more than you allow them to achieve." She paused in front of the main processing computer, a massive quantum system that coordinated the entire mining operation. For a moment she simply stood there, and Marcus could feel something building in the air around her, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. Then she placed her hand on the computer's housing. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every screen in the control room blazed with activity, as the computer suddenly began processing information at speeds that should have been physically impossible. Mining equipment that had been running sluggishly for years suddenly achieved perfect synchronization. Production estimates that had been calculated in hours were now being completed in minutes. But more than that, the computer seemed to come alive in a way that made everyone in the room deeply uncomfortable. Its responses became more intuitive, its calculations more creative, as if Lyrelei had somehow awakened something that had been sleeping within the machine. "Incredible," Morrison whispered, staring at readouts that showed production efficiency had increased by over 300%. "How did you do that?" Lyrelay removed her hand from the computer, and Marcus was relieved to see that it continued functioning normally, though at its new, enhanced level. "I simply helped it remember what it was capable of becoming," she said. "Your machines possess potential that you have not yet learned to access." Morrison was practically vibrating with excitement. "We need to talk about a long-term contract. The consortium would pay anything for this kind of improvement across all our operations." "That's a generous offer," Marcus said quickly, "but we really need to be getting back to our ship." But as they prepared to leave, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the control room in red, and automated voices began announcing the arrival of unscheduled ships. On the main display screen, Marcus could see sleek vessels dropping out of hyperspace around the asteroid. They were unmarked, but their aggressive approach patterns and the fact that they were jamming all communications made their intentions clear. "Pirates," Morrison said grimly. "They must have detected the increased output from our mining operation. They probably think we've discovered a new ore vein." Marcus looked at Lyrelay, who was studying the approaching ships with interest rather than fear. "Can the station's defenses handle them?" Morrison shook his head. "We have some automated weapon systems, but nothing designed to handle a coordinated attack by that many ships." The lead pirate vessel was broadcasting a message now, demanding that the mining operation shut down its defenses and prepare to be boarded. Marcus recognized the voice as belonging to Captain Voss, a notorious raider who had been operating in the outer systems for years. "They want the asteroid's mineral wealth," Lyrelay said quietly, "but they do not realize what they are truly facing." Marcus looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Lyrelay smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, there was something predatory in the expression. "They are about to discover that there are worse things in the galaxy than pirates. Captain Chen. They are about to meet beings who do not appreciate threats against their friends." As the first pirate ships began their attack run on the mining station, Marcus realized that his quiet life as a freight hauler was officially over. Whatever Lyrelay was about to do, whatever powers she was about to unleash, the galaxy was going to take notice, and when the dust settled, everyone would know the name of the human captain, who traveled with a being of such incredible power. The attack began with a coordinated strike against the mining station's defensive arrays. Captain Voss knew his business well, and his ships moved with the precision of a pack of wolves. Energy beams lanced out from the pirate vessels, systematically destroying the automated weapon platforms that protected the asteroid facility. Marcus watched from the control room as explosions blossomed across the mining station's surface. Morrison and his crew were trying frantically to coordinate a defense, but it was clear they were outmatched. The mining operation had never been designed to withstand a military assault. "Estimated time until their boarding pods reach us?" Morrison asked his tactical officer. 6 minutes, sir. They're cutting through our hull barriers like they're made of paper." Lyrelay stood calmly in the center of the chaos, seemingly unaffected by the alarms and flashing lights. Her skin had taken on a brighter luminescence, and Marcus could feel energy building around her like a gathering storm. "Lyrelay," he said urgently, "if you're going to do something, now would be a good time." She turned to him with those ancient eyes, and Marcus saw something in them that made him take a step back. There was power there, vast and alien, like looking into the heart of a star. "Do you trust me, Marcus?" she asked quietly. It was a strange question to ask in the middle of a battle, but Marcus found himself nodding without hesitation. "Yes. Then please ensure that all personnel retreat to the central command bunker. What I am about to do will affect every electronic system in this facility." Morrison looked up from his tactical display. "What are you talking about? What can you possibly do against an entire pirate fleet?" Instead of answering, Lyrelay walked to the control room's main computer terminal. She placed both hands on the interface, and immediately every screen in the room blazed with light. But this wasn't the gentle enhancement she had performed earlier. This was something far more dramatic. "All personnel to the command bunker now," Marcus shouted, grabbing Morrison by the arm. "Move!" They evacuated the control room just as the temperature began to spike. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see Lyrelay standing alone among the computers, her entire body now glowing with an intensity that was almost painful to look at directly. From the safety of the command bunker, Morrison's crew monitored the pirate assault through remote sensors. The first boarding pods had attached to the station's hull and were beginning to cut their way inside. Voss was broadcasting demands for surrender, threatening to space anyone who resisted. Then everything changed. The mining station's computer systems, already enhanced by Lorelai's earlier intervention, suddenly began operating at levels that defied comprehension. Every automated system, every piece of machinery, every electronic component throughout the facility became part of a vast network of coordinated intelligence. The mining equipment that had been extracting ore from the asteroid's core suddenly reversed its function. Instead of digging deeper, the massive excavators began redirecting the asteroid's mineral wealth toward the surface, creating new defensive structures with impossible speed. Metallic walls erupted from the asteroid's surface, forming protective barriers around critical systems, but that was just the beginning. The station's communication array, now operating at enhanced capacity, began transmitting signals that interfered with the pirates' ship systems. Navigation computers crashed, weapon targeting systems failed, and life support units began cycling unpredictably. "Impossible," Morrison whispered, watching his displays. "The entire asteroid is reshaping itself." Through the external cameras, they could see the mining facility transforming before their eyes. The asteroid's surface was flowing like liquid metal, forming new structures and defensive positions. Automated systems that had never been designed for combat were adapting themselves, becoming weapons with lethal efficiency. Captain Voss's voice crackled over the communication system, no longer demanding surrender but pleading for his ships to maintain formation. His fleet was in chaos, their sophisticated pirate vessels suddenly reduced to flying debris as their computer systems failed one by one. In the control room, Lorelai stood at the center of a storm of energy that connected her to every electronic system in the facility. Marcus could see her through the cameras, her form barely visible within the blazing light that surrounded her. She was communing with the machines, awakening capabilities that their designers had never imagined. The first pirate ship lost power completely and began drifting helplessly in space. The second managed to restore basic life support, but found its weapon systems completely non-functional. The remaining vessels tried to retreat, but their hyperspace drives refused to engage. "She's controlling everything," Morrison said in amazement. "Every computer, every automated system, every piece of technology in the facility. How is that possible?" Marcus remembered what Lorelai had told him about her people's connection to the quantum field. Apparently, that connection extended to artificial systems as well as natural ones. She wasn't just controlling the technology. She was communing with it, helping it transcend its original limitations. The asteroid continued its transformation, developing new structures that seemed to grow from the living rock itself. Defensive platforms emerged from what had been simple mining equipment. Communication arrays became directed energy weapons. Even the atmospheric processors were adapting, creating localized field effects that disrupted the pirates' sensors. Captain Voss made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. His flagship, larger and more heavily armed than the other vessels, managed to break free from the electronic interference and began charging its main weapons for a direct assault on the mining station. That's when Lorelai demonstrated the true extent of her power. The energy surrounding her intensified beyond anything Marcus had seen before. Every screen in the command bunker overloaded, showing cascading patterns of light that seemed to contain impossible geometric structures. And then somehow that energy reached out across space itself. Voss's flagship, a kilometer-long battlecruiser that had terrorized the outer systems for years, simply stopped. Not just its engines or its weapons, but everything. Every electronic system, every computer, every piece of technology aboard the vessel ceased to function simultaneously. The ship hung dead in space, its crew trapped inside a vessel that had become nothing more than an elaborate coffin. Through the emergency communication frequencies, they could hear Voss screaming orders that no one could follow, trying to restart systems that would never work again. One by one, the remaining pirate vessels suffered the same fate. Lorelai had reached out through the quantum connections that linked all technology and simply turned them off. Not damaged, not destroyed, but fundamentally altered at a level that made restoration impossible. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus realized that the galaxy had just witnessed something unprecedented. An unknown alien being had single-handedly defeated an entire pirate fleet without firing a shot, using nothing but her connection to the electronic systems around her. When Lorelei finally emerged from the control room, she appeared unchanged except for a slight paleness in her luminescent skin. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had just completed a particularly challenging but rewarding task. "The threat has been neutralized," she said simply. "The pirates' vessels are no longer functional, but their life support systems remain operational. They will be able to survive until rescue arrives." Morrison stared at her with a mixture of awe and terror. "What are you?" Lorelei considered the question for a moment. "I am someone who does not appreciate bullies," she said finally. "And I am Marcus Chen's partner." She looked at Marcus and he could see the question in her eyes. After what had just happened, after the display of power that had surely been detected by sensors across the system, there would be no more hiding. No more quiet freight runs to forgotten worlds. The galaxy would want answers, and they would want them from him. Marcus made his choice. He stepped forward and took Lorelei's hand, feeling the energy that flowed through her like electricity through his fingers. "That's right," he said clearly, "for everyone to hear. She's with me." As word of the incident spread across the communication networks, Marcus Chen's name would become known throughout human space and beyond. He was the captain who traveled with a being of unimaginable power, the human who had somehow earned the loyalty of someone who could reshape reality itself. The galaxy would never be the same. Word traveled fast in the Outer Rim territories. Within hours of the incident at the mining station, encrypted communications were flying between corporate headquarters, military installations, and government facilities across human space. Captain Marcus Chen and his mysterious companion had become the most talked-about subjects in the galaxy. Marcus had hoped to slip away quietly after the pirate attack, but that plan died when Morrison's superiors arrived at the asteroid facility. A convoy of corporate security vessels surrounded the mining station, followed closely by ships bearing the insignia of the Colonial Defense Force. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to meet the woman who could disable an entire fleet with her thoughts. "Captain Chen," Admiral Sarah Vega said as she stepped aboard the Iron Dream. Marcus had known her reputation even before meeting her in person. Vega was the CDF's top strategist, the woman responsible for maintaining human security in the contested outer systems. She was also known for her directness, which Marcus found both refreshing and terrifying. "Admiral," Marcus replied, standing at attention in his cargo bay. Lorelei stood beside him, studying the military officers with obvious curiosity. "I assume you're here about recent events." "That would be an understatement," Vega said dryly. "In the past 6 hours, we've received reports from 17 different intelligence sources claiming that an unknown alien entity destroyed Captain Voss's entire fleet without firing a shot. We've also had urgent communications from 3 major corporations, 2 minor governments, and a Caraxian trade delegation, all demanding information about your companion." She looked directly at Lorelei, who met her gaze without flinching. "I don't suppose you'd care to explain exactly what we're dealing with here." Lorelei inclined her head politely. "I am Lorelei of the Velthara. I was traveling with Captain Chen when we encountered the pirates. They threatened innocent people, so I discouraged them." "Discourage them," Admiral Vega repeated. "By shutting down every piece of technology on their ships simultaneously. Our analysts are calling it impossible. But we have sensor recordings from 12 different sources that all say the same thing." Marcus could see the tension in the Admiral's posture. The Colonial Defense Force was tasked with protecting human interests in a galaxy full of hostile aliens, and Lorelei represented something they'd never encountered before, a being with technological capabilities that could make their entire fleet obsolete overnight. "She's not a threat to humanity," Marcus said firmly. "She saved those miners' lives. She could have destroyed those pirate ships and everyone aboard them, but instead she just disabled them." "Yes, she showed remarkable restraint," Admiral Vega agreed. "The question is why. What does she want? What are her people planning? And why is she traveling with a freight hauler instead of making contact through official channels?" Before Lorelei could answer, the Iron Dream's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Marcus's heart sank when he saw the identification code. It was from Corporate Central, the consortium of mega-corporations that effectively controlled human expansion into the outer systems. "Captain Chen," the message began, displaying the image of a stern-faced executive. "This is Director Harrison of the Strategic Development Division. We are prepared to offer you and your companion exclusive contracts worth more credits than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Please respond immediately to arrange a meeting." The message was followed by another from the Scientific Research Council, then one from the Military Procurement Office, and then several more from organizations Marcus had never heard of. Everyone wanted to buy, hire, study, or control Lyrelei, and they all assumed Marcus was the key to reaching her. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid," Marcus muttered. Admiral Vega studied the incoming messages with professional interest. "You're about to become the most popular man in the galaxy, Captain. Every power broker, every government, every corporation is going to want to make a deal with you. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Lyrelei stepped forward, her luminescent skin brightening slightly. "If I may, Admiral Vega, I believe there has been a misunderstanding about my relationship with Captain Chen." "Oh?" Vega raised an eyebrow. "He is not my keeper or my handler. I'm not his property to be bought or sold. We are partners, traveling together by mutual choice. Any agreements or arrangements concerning me must be made with my full consent and participation." The Admiral smiled grimly. "I figured as much. But try explaining that to the corporate boards and military committees who are probably planning your future as we speak. They see you as an asset to be acquired, not a person to be negotiated with." Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. He'd spent his entire adult life trying to stay out of the political machinations that drove galactic civilization. Now he found himself at the center of what could become a power struggle between the most influential organizations in human space. "What do you recommend?" he asked the Admiral. Vega considered for a moment. "Officially, I should probably place both of you in protective custody while we sort this out. Unofficially, I think that would be a mistake. You've proven that you can handle yourselves, and frankly, I'm not sure we could contain your companion even if we tried." She paused, glancing at Lyrelei. "The best thing you can do is stay mobile. Don't let any one organization get their hooks into you. Play the different factions against each other. Make them compete for your cooperation instead of trying to force compliance." "You're suggesting we become freelance agents?" Marcus asked. "I'm suggesting you become legends," Vega replied. "The galaxy is full of powerful people who think they can control everything and everyone. Maybe it's time they learned otherwise." As if summoned by her words, the Iron Dream's sensors detected several ships dropping out of hyperspace nearby. They weren't military vessels, but their approach patterns suggested official business rather than casual interest. "Corporate security," Admiral Vega observed, checking her own displays. "Looks like 3 different companies trying to beat each other to you. This could get interesting." The lead ship began broadcasting a message, offering Marcus and Lyrelei safe passage to a secure facility where they could discuss mutually beneficial arrangements. The offer was quickly countered by the second ship, which promised even more generous terms. The third vessel simply demanded that Marcus surrender Lyrelei for scientific evaluation. "So much for subtlety," Marcus said. Lyrelei moved to the ship's control console, her hands hovering over the interface. "Shall I discourage them as well?" "No," Admiral Vega said quickly. "That would just escalate the situation. Right now, they're treating this as a business opportunity. If you start disabling corporate vessels, they'll classify you as a military threat." Marcus looked out at the approaching ships, then at Lyrelei, then at the Admiral, who was watching everything with the calculating gaze of someone trying to figure out how to turn a crisis into an advantage. "Admiral," he said slowly, "what if we made a different kind of deal? Not with the corporations or the research councils, but with the Colonial Defense Force?" Vega's eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of deal?" "The Outer Rim is full of problems that regular military forces can't handle effectively. Pirates, slavers, rogue AI systems, territorial disputes between alien species, things that require a more personal touch." "You're proposing to become freelance problem solvers," Vega said, "operating under CDF authority but with complete tactical independence." Marcus nodded. "Lyrelei gets to use her abilities to help people who need it. I get to keep doing what I do best, just with better backing. And the CDF gets a team that can handle situations where conventional approaches have failed." Lyrelei smiled, the expression lighting up her alien features. "I like this plan. It would allow us to make a positive difference while avoiding the political complications of working directly for corporations or research institutions." Admiral Vega was quiet for a long moment. considering the implications. Finally, she nodded. I can make that work. Give me a few hours to clear it with my superiors and draft the paperwork. In the meantime, I suggest you avoid those corporate ships. Marcus grinned and moved to the pilot station. That won't be a problem. Avoiding trouble is what I do best. As the Iron Dream's engines fired up, preparing to jump to hyperspace, Marcus realized that his life had just changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. He was no longer just a freight hauler trying to make a living in the Outer Rim. He was about to become the captain of the most unusual partnership in the galaxy, working to solve problems that no one else could handle. The corporations and research councils could fight over the scraps. Marcus Chen and Lyra Lee had more important work to do. 3 months into their new partnership with the Colonial Defense Force, Marcus and Lyra Lee had already earned a reputation as the team to call when conventional solutions failed. Their first official mission had been a rescue operation on Titan 7th, where corporate miners had awakened something ancient and hostile in the planet's core. Their second had involved mediating a territorial dispute between two alien species whose conflicts were threatening shipping lanes across an entire sector. But it was their third mission that would establish their legend throughout the galaxy. The call came from Admiral Vega herself, transmitted through encrypted channels to the Iron Dream while they were resupplying at Frontier Station. Marcus answered from the ship's communication center, with Lyra Lee standing beside him as she had for all their official briefings. Captain Chen, Vega's image said from the holographic display, we have a situation that requires your particular expertise. Are you familiar with the Nexus Colony? Marcus nodded grimly. Everyone in the Outer Rim knew about Nexus Colony, even if they tried not to think about it. The settlement had been established 20 years ago, on a planet rich in quantum crystals, valuable materials used in hyperspace navigation systems. The colony had thrived for 15 years, becoming one of the most prosperous settlements in human space. Then, 5 years ago, something had gone wrong. The colonists had stopped responding to communication attempts. Supply ships found the planet surrounded by an impenetrable energy barrier that prevented any approach. Automated probes sent toward the surface simply vanished without a trace. The barrier came down 3 days ago, Admiral Vega continued, as suddenly as it appeared. Our long-range sensors show signs of life on the planet, but attempts to establish communication have failed. We need someone to go down there and find out what happened to 50,000 colonists. Lyra Lee leaned forward, her expression troubled. Admiral, what kind of energy readings are you detecting from the planet? That's part of the problem, Vega admitted. Our sensors are picking up patterns that don't match any known technology. The quantum crystal deposits appear to have been modified somehow. They're generating energy signatures that our scientists can't explain. Marcus felt a familiar chill. In his experience, unexplainable energy signatures usually meant bad news for anyone stupid enough to investigate them. Why not send a full military expedition? We're talking about 50,000 people here. Because we don't know if they're prisoners, casualties, or something else entirely, Vega replied. If the colonists are being held by a hostile force, a military approach could get them killed. If they've been somehow changed by whatever happened there, we need to understand the situation before we commit significant resources. She paused, looking directly at both of them. Your companion's abilities with technology and energy systems make you uniquely qualified to handle whatever you might find down there. And Captain Chen, your record of keeping civilians safe under impossible circumstances makes you the right person to lead this investigation. Marcus glanced at Lyra Lee, who nodded slowly. They'd developed an understanding over the past few months, a way of communicating that went beyond words. She was as curious about the mysterious energy signatures as she was concerned about the missing colonists. All right, Marcus said. We'll take the job, but I want full tactical support on standby, and complete authority to abort the mission if the situation becomes untenable. Agreed, Vega said. There's a CDF task force station 2 hours away at maximum hyperspace speed. They'll move to the edge of the system once you begin your approach. The journey to Nexus Colony took 4 days, during which Marcus and Lyra Lee spent their time reviewing everything known about the planet and its mysterious isolation. The quantum crystal deposits were unlike anything found elsewhere in the galaxy, forming natural structures that seemed to focus and amplify energy fields. It was those crystals that had made the colony so valuable. and it was probably those same crystals that had created the barrier. The patterns remind me of something, Lyra Lay said as they studied the sensor readings from the last probe to approach the planet before the barrier appeared. The way the energy flows and concentrates, it's similar to the technology my people use, but different, more chaotic, less controlled. You think the colonists somehow activated the crystals? Marcus asked, perhaps. Or perhaps the crystals activated themselves. Quantum structures can develop a form of emergent consciousness under the right circumstances. If that happened here. She didn't finish the thought, but Marcus could imagine the implications. A planet-sized intelligence made of living crystal, with 50,000 human colonists caught in the middle. It sounded like something out of a nightmare. When they finally reached the Nexus system, Marcus's first view of the planet confirmed his worst fears. What had once been a blue-green world with carefully planned settlements was now something else entirely. The surface was covered with crystalline structures that stretched from the former colony sites into elaborate geometric patterns that could be seen from orbit. The patterns pulsed with soft light, creating a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Life signs? Marcus asked as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Widespread, Lyra Lee replied, monitoring the enhanced sensors she'd modified with her abilities. But different. The colonists are alive, but their bioelectric signatures have changed. They're connected to something larger. The Iron Dream touched down in what had once been the colony's main spaceport. Now it was a landing platform made of smoothly polished crystal that seemed to have grown from the ground itself. As Marcus and Lyra Lay emerged from the ship, they were greeted by a delegation of beings that had once been human. The colonists still looked essentially human, but their skin had taken on a faint crystalline quality that reflected the light in prismatic patterns. Their eyes held depths that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of Lyra Lay's, and when they moved, they did so with perfect synchronization, as if guided by a shared consciousness. "Welcome," one of them said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Marcus's bones. "We have been waiting for you." Marcus kept his hand near his sidearm, though he suspected it would be useless if these beings decided to become hostile. "What happened here? Where is everyone?" "We are everyone," the woman replied. "We became something more than we were. The crystals showed us how to transcend our individual limitations and become part of something greater." Lirali stepped forward, her own skin beginning to glow in response to the energy field surrounding them. The quantum consciousness awakened, didn't it? The crystals formed a collective intelligence and you joined with it. "Yes," the woman said, turning her attention to Lirali with obvious interest. "You understand. You are like us, connected to the energy that flows through all things, but you maintain your individuality even within the connection." Marcus felt a chill as he realized what was happening. The colonists hadn't been captured or enslaved. They had been converted, absorbed into a collective consciousness that was part crystal, part human, and something entirely new. "Are you prisoners here?" he asked. The woman smiled, an expression that was both human and utterly alien. "We are free in ways we never imagined possible, but we understand that our transformation might seem frightening to those who have not experienced it. That is why we lowered the barrier. We wanted to share what we have learned." Lirali placed a warning hand on Marcus's arm. "The collective is trying to expand," she said quietly. "I can feel it probing my consciousness, offering to share its knowledge and power. It's not malicious, but it's persuasive." Marcus looked around at the crystal structures that surrounded them, at the colonists who watched with eyes that held the wisdom of a planetary intelligence. This wasn't a rescue situation. This was first contact with a new form of life, one that had been born from the merger of human consciousness and alien crystals. The question was, what was he going to do about it? "We need to talk," Marcus said to the woman who had greeted them. "All of us, human to human, before any decisions are made about the future." The woman nodded, her crystalline features reflecting his image in fractal patterns. "Yes," she said. "There is much to discuss, and there are those among us who have questions about what we have become." As they walked deeper into the transformed colony, Marcus realized that this mission would test everything he and Lirali had learned about cooperation, understanding, and the delicate balance between progress and preservation of identity. The galaxy was watching, and their decisions here would echo across the stars for generations to come. The conversation that followed would be remembered as one of the most important negotiations in human history. Marcus found himself mediating between the collective consciousness of Nexus Colony and the representatives of human civilization, with Lyrelai serving as both translator and guardian against the subtle mental influence of the crystalline intelligence. They gathered in what had once been the colony's council chambers, now transformed into a circular room of living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. The colonist representatives retained enough individuality to serve as spokespeople, while the collective consciousness communicated through harmonic frequencies that Lyrelai interpreted for Marcus. The entity is not malevolent, Lyrelai explained as the negotiations began. It simply exists according to different principles than organic life. It values unity, shared knowledge, and collective growth. It offered the colonists an evolution, not a conquest. But not all of them chose it willingly, Marcus pointed out. He'd been talking to individual colonists for hours, and while many spoke enthusiastically about their transformation, others showed signs of confusion and distress about their changed state. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been the colony's chief scientist before the transformation, retained enough of her individual personality to serve as a primary contact. "The collective offered us everything," she said, her crystalline eyes reflecting depths of knowledge that made Marcus uncomfortable. An end to loneliness, to uncertainty, to the limitations of individual consciousness. Most of us embraced it willingly. Most, Marcus repeated. What about the others? Dr. Kim's expression flickered with something that might have been regret. Some resisted. Children primarily, and a few adults who found the prospect of unity frightening. They were incorporated anyway for their own protection. Marcus felt his anger rising. "You forced children to join your collective consciousness against their will?" "We saved them from the limitations of isolated existence," another colonist interjected. "They are happier now, part of something greater than themselves." Lyrelai placed a calming hand on Marcus's shoulder. "The collective doesn't understand individual autonomy the way humans do," she said quietly. To them, incorporating the unwilling was an act of kindness, like rescuing someone from drowning. "That doesn't make it right," Marcus said firmly. He turned to address the room, knowing that his words were being heard by the entire collective through its various human components. "You had no right to force anyone to join you regardless of your intentions. And you especially had no right to make that choice for children who couldn't understand what they were giving up." The room fell silent, the gentle humming of the crystalline structures diminishing to barely audible levels. When Dr. Kim spoke again, her voice carried harmonics of the entire collective. "You believe we have committed a crime," she said, "that our desire for unity has violated principles we no longer fully comprehend. Perhaps you are correct. The individual perspectives we absorbed continue to create dissonance within our collective harmony." Marcus sensed an opportunity. "Then let them go. If someone wants to leave the collective, let them make that choice freely." "It is not that simple," Dr. Kim replied. "The transformation changes consciousness at a fundamental level. Separation from the collective would be traumatic, possibly fatal." Lyrelai stepped forward, her own skin brightening as she communed with the energy patterns around them. "There might be a way," she said slowly. "My people develop techniques for maintaining individual consciousness within collective experiences. It requires careful calibration, but it can be done." The collective was silent for a long moment, internal communications flowing through frequencies that made the air itself vibrate. Finally, Dr. Kim spoke again. "You would help us? Even after learning what we have done?" "I would help you fix what can be fixed," Lyrelai replied, "and prevent similar situations in the future." What followed was the most delicate operation Marcus had ever witnessed. Lyrelai worked with the collective consciousness for 3 days, carefully mapping the connections between individual minds and the crystalline intelligence. The process was dangerous, requiring her to partially merge her own consciousness with the collective while maintaining enough independence to guide the separation process. Marcus watched through the crystal chamber's viewing panels as Lyrelai's form became increasingly luminescent, her connection to the collective deepening until he could barely see her physical body within the blazing energy that surrounded her. For terrifying hours, he thought he might lose her to the same transformation that had claimed the colonists. But Lyrelai's training with her own people's technology proved sufficient. One by one, she began separating individual consciousnesses from the collective, creating what she called conscious bridges, that allowed people to choose their level of connection with the crystalline intelligence. The first to emerge was a young girl named Emma, no more than 8 years old when the transformation had occurred. She awakened with tears streaming down her face, her crystalline features gradually returning to normal human appearance as Lyra severed her connection to the collective. "I want to go home," Emma whispered, reaching out for Marcus with trembling hands. "I want to see my parents." Marcus held the child while Lyra continued her work, feeling the weight of responsibility for every life that hung in the balance. By the end of the third day, over 5,000 colonists had chosen to return to individual consciousness, while the remaining 45,000 opted to remain part of the collective. But perhaps most importantly, Lyra had established a new protocol for the collective consciousness. Never again would it incorporate unwilling individuals. Those who chose to join would do so with full knowledge of what they were gaining and what they were giving up, and those who wished to leave would be allowed to do so safely. The resolution of the Nexus colony crisis sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Marcus and Lyra had not only solved an impossible situation, but had established new precedents for dealing with emergent artificial intelligences and collective consciousness entities. Their success led to their recognition as the galaxy's foremost specialists in first contact scenarios and technological anomalies. But for Marcus, the most important outcome was simpler than galactic recognition. As he watched the rescued colonists boarding transport ships that would take them to new homes throughout human space, he realized that he had found his true calling. Not as a freight hauler or even as a problem solver, but as a protector of choice, a guardian of individual freedom in a galaxy where powerful forces constantly threatened to overwhelm the rights of ordinary people. Lyra approached him as the last transport departed. Her luminescent skin dimmed with exhaustion, but her ancient eyes bright with satisfaction. "Another successful mission, Captain," she said with a tired smile. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about all the other crises that might be waiting in the vast darkness of space. Somewhere out there, people were probably facing impossible situations, trapped by circumstances beyond their control, waiting for someone to help them find a way out. "You know," he said to Lyra, "I think I'm starting to like this job," she laughed, the sound carrying harmonics that made the very air around them seem brighter. "I believe the galaxy is fortunate to have you, Marcus Chen." Both as a captain and as a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons or technology, but with compassion and the unwavering belief that every individual deserves the right to choose their own destiny. As the Iron Dream departed the Nexus system, its destination set for whatever crisis Admiral Vega would assign them next, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that day he found Lyra floating in the wreckage of Kepler Station. He had started as a simple freight hauler trying to make a living in the Outer Rim. Now he was Captain Marcus Chen, known throughout the galaxy as the man who traveled with a being of incredible power, the human who had somehow earned the loyalty and partnership of someone who could reshape reality itself. He was the captain who solved impossible problems, who found ways to protect the innocent when no one else could, who proved that sometimes the most important victories came not from superior firepower, but from understanding and compassion. The galaxy knew his name now, and more importantly, it knew what he stood for. In a universe where individuals often felt powerless against vast corporate interests, military bureaucracies, and alien intelligences, Marcus Chen and Lyra represented something different. They were proof that partnerships built on mutual respect and shared values could overcome any obstacle, no matter how impossible it might seem. Their legend would grow with each mission, each crisis resolved, each life saved. But for Marcus, the greatest reward would always be the simple knowledge that he had found his place in the universe. Working alongside someone who had become far more than a partner, she had become family, and together they would face whatever challenges the galaxy could throw at them.